Good morning. I'm doing a piece this morning called Boundary Lines and Goodness. I'm going to speak about just 3 points, each of which represents a boundary line. When we speak of goodness, I believe that the definition of that should be clear, not fuzzy. I believe that the more relativistic a person becomes in so important an area as goodness, the more trouble lies ahead, and probably it will be more difficult to advance in life in the effort to become an ever more good person. Something as important as being good and the difficult labor that's entailed in overcoming obstacles, temptations, and insufficiencies in the effort to become good should not be clouded by not even having any idea what exactly that is or what it looks like. So, in terms of seeking a simple point of clarity for goodness itself, or what good is, so that I can pursue it and invest in the effort to improve in that area, I believe that there is a simple boundary line. It's an exact and precise single point wherein lies no confusion for me, and I'd like to recommend it. I think it's helpful. That boundary line is every thought, word, or deed that is designed to advantage myself at the cost of others is evil. It's an evil thought, it's an evil word, it's an evil deed. Every time I am willing to disadvantage another person for the sake of my own advantage, I believe that that is an evil act. And every thought, word, and deed in which I am willing to sacrifice myself for the benefit and welfare and improvement in the circumstances and opportunities of others, that is good. Or so goodness for me is defined and understood simply, and that is that I put the welfare of others, and especially concretely, not generically or generally or all Iroquois or all Asians or something, but the person right in front of me, that their welfare overwhelms my natural impulse to seeking my own advantage. That is living in a state of goodness. I'm overwhelmed by my concern for others. If I can live in such a way that the circumstances of others are harmed in my pursuit of advantages for myself, whether it's greed or wealth or sex or no matter what particular thing I'm after, even if it's aspirations for a career, even aspirations in a noble career, I believe that if I'm willing to sacrifice others for those advances, I'm acting in a bad way. So that's the first boundary line. It's as simple as can be. So in this conversation here, boundary lines and goodness, the first one simply has to do with coming up with a definition. And I think the definition lies on a simple, clear, singular, identifiable boundary line. Once I have this definition, then I can begin seriously to weigh and examine and study each and every thought, word, and deed that ever kind of crosses my particular transom, and assess it. And once I'm able to assess my behavior, my thoughts, my words, my deeds, then I can actually start to design programs to improve myself in a pursuit that's important to me. I would like to be good. Once that's established, then there is the next question, that is, for whom is it possible, or for whom do I naturally care for the welfare of others? For bad people, even for criminals of enormous sadism and massive human degradation and genocide, even such people love their families. They love their sons and daughters. They go to the ends of the earth. They crawl through, sewers and over broken glass to save their little daughter, even though this person might be a greedy, genocidal bastard, rapist, who knows? But something about family, or you might be, an assassin, but you buy a house for your mom. I love my mom. So there's something about family in which this tradition or standard of what you would call good obtains, even in people whose the quality or definition of their life is generally would be agreed upon as an evil person. Think of a child trafficker or a pornographer that loves his mom and uses his money so that she has a comfortable life in the suburbs in Illinois or something. So family seems to be a place where this natural impulse towards goodness obtains regardless of the quality of life. Not always, not always. Modern people have learned to become greedy enough to break up their families and cause their kids have miserable childhoods and stuff, divorcing 4, 5, 6 times. So it's not always the case. Modern life has kind of attained a level of self-interest that even transcends the natural, even animalistic instincts to take care of your family or your young. Sad there. That's a sad reality. But generally speaking, this idea of loving your children or loving your parents or loving your brothers and sisters, this is an arena in which the definition I gave for goodness is operative. So, so then, if this is natural, even to wolverines and to skunks and to giraffes and to mafiosi and to the Nestle's executive that decided to poison half of Chad, or if loving one's family is a natural there, it's arena of it's an arena in which goodness can obtain, even in a little bit, even in base creatures like a slug, uh, and bad people, even bad people. But so if that's natural there, kind of the goodness in a certain respect, not completely, but in a certain respect, the goodness that comes out of me under those circumstances are hardly an achievement in a way. They are a biogenetic, biological nature of just existing as a creature. And so thank God that there is some kind of essential basis for goodness, so that there's not just raw chaotic avarice and assault at every turn, even in your own household. So there's some structural basis in the universe where this goodness applies, at least on this tiny level. But since that applies everywhere, in a skunk and in a hippopotamus and in a mafiosi, um, then that's hardly an arena in which I it's legitimate for me to measure or claim myself to be good. So the next boundary line I want to introduce in this short conversation is the boundary line between what is my family and what's not my family. Since I'm given a free gift of recognizing what it feels like and what it is like to have the welfare of another person as my primary concern, like the safety of my daughter or the comfort of my mother. Since I'm given some hints, I'm given a free introduction into what goodness is like and feels like. The next boundary level, I believe, for human beings that are genuinely concerned about the quality of their goodness and improving ourselves as in the effort to be good, is what is family, what's not family, what's blood, what's not blood. As soon as an individual is outside of that free gift, that free biological gift of natural care that I don't have to try to create, it's just my daughter, it's my girl, I care for her. That boundary line is the first one that we need to pay very close attention to. And I believe personally that that has not been given adequate attention in the history of religious systems, spiritual systems, anything that's designed to try to make people good. That boundary line between what is family and what's not family hasn't really been closely examined enough. But I recommend for us on this podcast that if we are interested in pursuing a life of goodness, that we pay very close attention to that. Because what we want to do is find someone who's outside, who it's an option how I treat them. It's not a biological given, it's not a cosmological, structurally given. That girl, that's my daughter, I just love her automatically. This is a person I have to make an option for. And that person I can step on or I can uplift. That's the point outside of which is the beginning of the arena in which I can actually start to construct myself as a good person. That's the second boundary line. Okay, there's plenty of people who do work well outside of that boundary line. There's teachers in primary school or all the way up through whatever, in the even postgraduate school, who care so much for children who are not their own. They sacrifice enormously for children who are not their own. So that's just teachers. There's doctors, nurses. We're in the COVID era. We think of first responders. We think of people who are sacrificing themselves, full of compassion and care, more than for their own family. They're even sacrificing time with their family. They're even endangering their family to care for strangers. That's an option. That's the beginning of real goodness, and that's the path to saintliness. Those are people outside the bloodline. Okay. But now the next and the third and final boundary that I want to introduce here is those people who one finds to be an enemy of my chosen population, whom I'll care for. So, for example, say I'm a social worker that works in an inner city ghetto that's made primarily of people of different racial, ethnic minorities. And there's a group of people who conduct themselves in ways, maybe they're legislators, maybe they're business owners, maybe they're just natural people driving down the street, whom I believe are perpetrators of harm to people of color, to inner city disadvantaged people. These people are kind of enemies to the population where I've chosen to get into that second arena of goodness beyond family. And there's people I care for. Say I'm caring for old elderly during the COVID era, and then there's some legislators who are doing things that threaten the elderly. These people are doing things that are hostile to the people I've chosen to love, the people where my goodness and my saintliness are are being exercised to extreme degrees. I'm losing sleep. I'm losing weight. I've already had COVID once. I've been sick. I almost died, but I'm back out there again, caring again. There's people to whom my entire investment of goodness beyond the mere biological gift of family. I've already transcended that second line. But then there's a third boundary line, and this is the final one that I'm talking about today. This third boundary line has to do with that segment of the population who, in my estimation, are responsible for or actively perpetrating harm against the people for whom I care. That group of people is the final and most difficult arena. So most people in the contemporary world don't consider a responsibility for opponents to my purposes. They don't consider that they are worthy of goodness. They don't consider that someone in that category that I should have any degree of concern or care at the expense of myself. This is why you have people who are who are killing innocent people because they perceive them to be part of a system that harms the people they care for. Say if their particular cause has to do with quote unquote racial equality or quote unquote racism or something like that. And so there's people who they know nothing about mothers and fathers, innocent people who have young children at home, and they're killing them and they're blinding them. There's people they've never met who've saved all their lives and suffered, maybe even lost a child, and built a small store to try to raise enough money to feed the remaining children of his family. They're burning those people's buildings down. They have nowhere to make their living. They have nowhere to live. People they've never met. Why? Because they believe they're defending some subsection of the population, the historical people who've been wronged by the forces of so-called racism or in fact racism and so forth. So this is an enemy category, and that's the final and most difficult boundary line. And the third boundary line that I'm talking about on this short podcast, how do I exercise the normal defined principle of goodness for quote unquote my enemies? Only religious systems and some spiritual systems have any attention to this. But if we think we're doing good, and our definition of goodness allows me to kill an innocent father of a young family whom I know nothing about in the name of caring for the people I care for, there's somehow a boundary line which my understanding of goodness has yet to transcend. That capacity of how to treat one's quote unquote enemies. These are not necessarily people who are enemies to me. They know nothing about me. They've never done anything to me. But I'll put them in a category of enemies because I perceive them or define them as threatening a community I care for. That category. That's the third and final area. I believe it's impossible to call oneself good and to stay steadily on a path of goodness if one does not take serious investment in trying to understand what is the position and posture of goodness, every thought, word, and deed, vis-a-vis this final category. So you have the basic boundary line between good and evil, the second boundary line between family and not family, but that third and final boundary line, this needs enormous attention, especially at the social and political level. It needs enormous attention. So people of goodness, I beg us, please, let's consider these boundary lines and let's forge a collective pursuit of genuine goodness in which all of us can have a record that is admirable and saintly. Thanks a lot for listening to me this morning, and I'll be back again with us soon.